Okay, a final video in this huge set of videos. I hope this is manageable for you guys. Conclusions on Solow's mechanisms. Like I said, this is like the core of the course. So what can we conclude? Taking the three mechanisms together and comparing them. The first conclusion is that all the mechanisms together help to hold the overall factor share of natural resources and energy approximately constant, explaining the fit of the Cobb-Douglas function. If the factor share goes up over time, any or all of the three mechanisms can kick in, helping to bring it back down. So, if the price of aluminium rises steeply, that increases the overall factor share of metals, but firms economizing on aluminium and shifting to alternative metals and a falling quantity of aluminium-based products would all tend to counter this effect, bring the share back down. Okay, so that's the first thing. But if we, despite everything, want to say, okay, but which of the mechanisms is most important? Jevons paradox tells us that efficiency in a resource and shifts in consumption towards that resource tend to go together, or efficiency in use of a resource, which diminishes the overall effect of efficiency increases on resource demand. And in the data, we see that huge efficiency increases are often associated with huge increases in quantity, as with lighting. At the same time, we know that consumers are typically relatively insensitive to price increases or decreases when it comes to large categories of consumption, as opposed to switching between brands, and that resources typically only make up a fairly small part of the prices of most goods. So what's this telling us? It's not surprising to see that switches between resources are where we see the most dramatic shifts. This is the most powerful mechanism. Okay, when aluminium gets more expensive, we shift to alternative metals to a greater extent, a much greater extent, than we learn to use aluminium more efficiently, or that we shift out of products that require aluminium. Okay, we shift to alternative metals. Similarly, when coal gets expensive, we shift to oil or gas rather than building more efficient motors or stopping driving, say, or stopping using electricity, whatever. When fossil fuels as a whole get more expensive, we will, to an extent, economize on energy. To an extent, we will shift out of energy-intensive products, but the main effect will be we'll shift to other ways of generating energy. That is the key mechanism, at least historically, and in my opinion, it will also be the key mechanism in the future. So what are the policy implications? Well, it's not that radical, really. You want to have well-defined, you would definitely want to make sure there are well-defined property rights over resources, the stocks in the ground, so that the prices reflect the true scarcity of the resource. You don't have open access resources. If the interest rate is not socially optimal, this could be a problem, because then you might, given the Hoteling rule, you might have too low prices for the resources, but that's super hard to solve. If knowledge stocks grow independently, then there could be a need for huge subsidies to R&D into alternative resources if we've got this lock-in tendency and we want to shift to new resources. Firms don't do, under these circumstances, firms won't do enough research on their own into the alternative resources because the short-term returns to that research are low. Given the independent knowledge stocks, it takes a long time to bring the new resource up to speed. So that initial investment gives very low returns. Later you get returns, but those returns will go to other firms. And the firms who do the initial investment and stand at the bottom of the tower of people on each other's shoulders, they get nothing. So that's why you need big policy subsidies, whatever, if you have knowledge, independent knowledge. But we don't have independent knowledge, right? The green guys stand on top of the grey guys, remember? So sure, there might be some need for policy there, subsidies for clean investment and so on, but it's not that important. So at the end of all this, we've come to the final conclusion, like the key is like well-defined property rights, etc. So why spend all this time on natural resources if at the end of the day the policy issues aren't that great? One reason is that all this work is an absolutely essential foundation for understanding pollution, which is what we're going to come to next. And also, it would also be essential for biodiversity, but we're not going to talk about biodiversity. Okay, so that is the end of the mechanisms. And the next core lecture, we're going to get onto pollution